When the Malon Empire made the fatal mistake of kidnapping the daughter of Earth's president, that galactic superpower just fucked around and found out why you never, ever mess with humanity's children. Private Logan Skora couldn't believe the urgent message blaring across his comm station at the Tycho moon base. A young human girl, abducted by the ruthless aliens who ruled this arm of the Milky Way with an iron tentacle. Now a helpless hostage. His blood ran cold reading the Malon demands, total surrender of Earth and all her colonies. All 200 billion humans, prostrating themselves before Malon rule, or the girl dies and Earth burns. Malon ships swarmed Earth space in a chokehold blockade as the ultimatum rang out across every human world. Most species would beg for mercy. The Malon expected humanity to meekly submit and add its territory to their galactic hegemony. What those sadistic alien bastards failed to comprehend was that the girl they snatched was the beloved 8-year-old daughter of President Eliza Shu, and that behind closed doors on Earth, the most powerful men and women on the planet were not despairing. They were enraged. The Malon had no idea of the sleeping giant they just woke. Since the early days of the 21st century, the greatest human minds secretly toiled on a classified project, deep beneath the Siberian wasteland, resurrecting and upgrading an ancient alien warship, a relic from a precursor civilization eons more advanced than the Malon. Disassembled and smuggled to Earth by a long-dead species as a gift and a warning for nascent humanity, it lay hidden for generations. Now the ship lived again, rechristened by its human masters as the Retribution. On an emergency broadcast to all humankind, Earth's leaders spoke with one voice. They would not bow to Malon tyranny. They would not leave one of their own behind enemy lines. Instead, to rescue the girl and teach the galaxy the depths of human resolve, they were activating the Retribution and sending it on a strike mission into the heart of Malon space. Logan gripped his seat's armrests until his knuckles whitened as he read the next part of the transmission. He was being assigned to the Retribution as leader of the commando team that would spearhead the operation. Long marked as a gifted but insubordinate maverick by his superiors, it seemed they were finally letting him off the leash to do what he did best, kicking ass and not bothering with names. En route to Earth to rendezvous with the Retribution, Logan reviewed the mission briefing with a hardening face and a sick feeling in his gut. The ancient alien ship would smash through the blockade, hurtle across the stars, and breach the defenses of the Malon throne world. Logan and his crack squad would execute a lightning raid on the planet's surface, infiltrate the capital palace, and extract the girl before the Malon Emperor knew what hit him. Time was critical. In 10 planet rotations, the Malon would execute their captive in a public spectacle, broadcasting her death to the galaxy as proof of their supremacy and humanity's impotence. Logan snarled with righteous fury. Like hell he would let that happen. He pocketed the datapad and gazed out the shuttle viewport at the looming hull of the Retribution. He had watched this day approach for years, the day humanity would reveal its hidden ace in the hole and pick a fight with the biggest dog in the galactic yard. Maybe it was foolish, maybe it was suicidal, but the Malon had crossed a line by preying on human children and honor demanded blood. If this was to be humanity's first and last stand against the darkness, so be it. His fellow commandos were already waiting for him, grim-faced and clad in midnight black armor as they stood before the Retribution's opening bay doors. Each carried enough firepower to conquer a small moon. As humanity's best and brightest, they all knew the stakes, knew that the next hours would decide the fate not just of a kidnapped little girl, but of the human race itself. Logan drew his mag rifle and racked the slide to chamber a hypersonic slug. No more words were necessary. The deck shuddered as the Retribution engaged its impossibly advanced star drive, exotic energies crackling and coalescing to bend the very fabric of spacetime. With a blinding flash and an echoing boom, the human warship, the last wrath of a long-dead race, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed in an eye blink. Inertial dampers struggled against unimaginable G-forces. Logan braced himself as the ship knifed through the starry void. No turning back now. The Retribution hurtled across the light years, an implacable sword aimed at the Malan throne world and the kidnappers of an innocent girl who thought themselves beyond retribution. But the human race had a message to deliver to the Malan Emperor, to the galaxy, to the universe itself. "We are coming for our daughter, you alien sons of bitches, and God help anyone who stands in our way." The Retribution tore through hyperspace, its ancient engines humming with power beyond human comprehension. Logan stood in the war room, surrounded by holographic displays of star charts and battle plans. His focus shattered as an urgent transmission crackled through. "Private Skora, new intel from Earth Command," the comms officer reported. "The girl isn't on the throne world. They've moved her to Brulex." Logan's stomach dropped. Brulex, the Emperor's personal fortress moon. He'd heard whispers of its impenetrable defenses. "Brulex is protected by a planet-wide energy shield," the officer continued, "and it's crawling with Malon ships and troops. A frontal assault would be suicide," Logan finished grimly. He paced the room, mind racing. They couldn't abort now. That little girl was counting on them, on him. An idea sparked, risky as hell, but it just might work. "Get me Sergeant Malik," Logan barked. "We're changing plans." Minutes later, Logan briefed his hand-picked team, 6 of Earth's deadliest soldiers, armed with prototype weapons from the Retribution's otherworldly arsenal. "Small team cloaked dropship," Logan explained. "We slip past their defenses, disable the shield generator, and clear the way for the cavalry." Malik nodded grimly. "Just another day at the office, sir." The dropship detached from the Retribution, cloaking field shimmering as it plunged towards Brulex. Logan gripped the controls, weaving between patrolling Malon fighters that passed within meters of their hull. Alarms blared as they entered the atmosphere, shields straining against the friction. Logan's nucleus tightening on the stick as he guided them through roiling clouds. The ship shuddered violently before bursting into clear skies. A desolate landscape of ice and jagged peaks stretched below. Logan spotted a sheltered valley and set the ship down with a bone-jarring thud. "Gear up," he ordered. "It's going to be a cold walk." The team trudged across the frozen wasteland, stealth suits barely keeping out the bone-chilling wind. After hours of grueling hiking, they crested a ridge and Logan's breath caught in his throat. The prison complex sprawled across the valley floor, a maze of twisting structures surrounded by crackling plasma cannons. Bat-faced Malon troops swarmed over the facility like insects. Logan checked the schematic on his wrist computer. There, maintenance tunnels, our ticket inside. They slipped past patrols to a ventilation grate. Logan placed breaching charges and the team dove through the smoking hole. Alarms immediately blared. Logan cursed. So much for stealth. Malon guards poured into the tunnel, screeching war cries. Logan's team unleashed hell. Plasma bolts and laser beams lit up the confined space. The stench of ozone and burning flesh filled the air. When the smoke cleared, a dozen twitching Malon corpses littered the floor. Logan's people were bloodied but standing. "Move!" he barked. They raced deeper into the complex. They found a control room and Malik got to work, fingers flying over alien consoles. "Got it," he reported. "The girl's in the high security block, Central Tower." Logan nodded and started planting demolition charges on key structural points. "This'll bring down their shield, but they know we're here now. It's gonna get ugly." On cue, the facility's PA system crackled to life with alien shrieks. Malon troops flooded the corridors. "Time to go loud," Logan growled, hefting his rifle. What followed was a running battle through twisting hallways. Logan's team fought like demons, but they were badly outnumbered. Wounds accumulated. Ammo ran low. They finally reached the central tower, leaving a trail of Malon bodies in their wake. Logan paused to catch his breath, noticing a glittering throne room through a nearby window. Security monitors showed a sneering alien face, Emperor Boron himself, surrounded by hulking bodyguards. The Malon ruler gestured angrily, clearly coordinating the defense. Logan's blood ran cold as realization dawned. "It's a trap," he breathed. "They knew we were coming." But there was no turning back now. They charged into the high security block, blasting through the final barriers. And there she was. The president's daughter huddled in a corner, clothes tattered and dirty, but her eyes blazed with defiance as Logan cut her free. "I knew you'd come," she said fiercely. Logan allowed himself a small smile. "Let's get you home, kid." But as they turned to leave, the lights suddenly failed. Utter blackness engulfed them. A cold, cruel laugh echoed through the darkness. Logan's skin crawled at the sound. "Welcome, primitives." Emperor Boron's voice dripped with malice. "I do hope you've enjoyed your little raid, because now the real fun begins." Oh. The Retribution shuddered as it tore through hyperspace, hull plating groaning under the strain. Logan gripped the command chair, fist clenched. "Damage report!" "Shields at 18%, his XO barked. "Hull breaches on decks 3 through 7. Medical bay overflowing." Logan cursed. The battle over Brulex had been brutal. They'd extracted the girl, but at a terrible cost. Now Earth needed them, and his ship was falling apart. "Sir!" The sensor officer's voice cracked. "Long-range scans detecting massive Malin fleet approaching Earth's defense perimeter." Logan's blood ran cold as the feed from recon drones flickered onto the main view screen. An armada of Milan ships stretched as far as the eye could see. Tens of thousands of them. "Dear God," someone whispered. The comms crackled. "Retribution, this is Earth Command. You are ordered to divert course and rendezvous with remnant fleet behind the asteroid belt. Repeat, abort Earth approach and regroup for last stand." "Negative," Logan snarled. "We're not abandoning—" "That's an order, Captain," the voice cut in. "Earth is lost. Save who you can." Logan's fists clenched as the Retribution's course shifted. On screen, Emperor Boron's twisted face filled the frame. "Watch, little humans," the alien monarch hissed. "Watch as your pathetic world burns." The camera panned to show the president's daughter, chained and bruised. Boron yanked her hair. "You'll have a front row seat, my pet." Something snapped inside Logan. "Belay that course change," he barked. "All fighters launch. We're going in." "Sir," his XO gaped. "That's suicide." "I said launch." Alarms blared as Retribution's fighter squadrons streaked from the launch bays, peppering the Malin scout ships with a blistering salvo. "Now!" Logan roared. "Jump us straight into that bastard's teeth." Reality twisted as the ancient FTL drive engaged. Logan's crew clung to their stations as the ship hurtled towards certain doom. They burst into real space above a barely recognizable Luna, its surface scarred by Milan bombardment. But Logan had no time to mourn. "All batteries fire at will." The Retribution's guns lit up the void. Torpedoes and energy beams lashed out, catching the surprised Milan vanguard off guard. Cruisers crumpled, vaporized by antimatter warheads. Fighters swarmed around them, human and alien, locked in desperate combat. Explosions bloomed silently, raining debris onto the Earth below. On his command throne, Emperor Boron raged at the sudden assault. "Obliterate that ship!" he shrieked. "Release the hunters! I want Skora's head!" Swarms of sleek drones poured from Milan hangars, zeroing in on the Retribution with single-minded purpose. Logan watched them approach, a grim smile on his face. They'd made their stand. Whatever happened next, Earth would not fall without a fight. Logan's eyes fixed on the shattered main screen. His teeth gritted as he watched Earth's atmosphere ignite. The Milan dreadnoughts loomed large, their kilometer-wide hulls blotting out the stars as they systematically obliterated the last of humanity's orbital defenses. "Shields down to 5%, shouted his XO, voice cracking with strain. "We can't take much more of this." The bridge rocked violently as another volley from Boron's flagship slammed into the Retribution. Sparks erupted from consoles, acrid smoke filling the air. Logan stumbled, catching himself on a twisted bulkhead. "Reroute all auxiliary power to weapons," he barked, dragging himself back to the command chair. "We're not done yet." Outside, swarms of Milan hunter-killer drones engulfed the ship, their plasma beams carving glowing furrows across the hull. The view screens flickered and died, leaving them blind save for the battle damage readouts flashing red across every display. In Earth's upper atmosphere, human fighters twisted and dove in desperate aerial combat. Logan watched a squadron of F-35s streak past, afterburners flaring as they engaged a wing of bat-like Malin strike craft. Explosions bloomed silently in the void, debris and bodies tumbling away. "Sir," cried the sensor officer, "multiple large contacts inbound. Readings suggest—" "Oh, God." Logan's blood ran cold as he saw the readouts. Virus bombers, hundreds of them. "All batteries, target those bombers," he roared, hitting his fist on the arm of his chair. "Don't let a single one through." The Retribution's guns opened up, lancing out with sheets of antimatter fire. Missiles streaked from their tubes, their exhausts painting fiery lines across space. The first wave of bombers disintegrated, but more pushed through the debris field, relentless. A thunderous impact shook the ship. Klaxons blared as atmosphere vented from multiple decks. "Hull breach!" someone shouted. "We're losing structural integrity!" Logan gritted his teeth, tasting blood. He crawled across the tilting deck towards the weapons station, shoving aside fallen debris. His fingers flew across the controls, overriding safeties and diverting every scrap of power to the main guns. "Come on, you bastard," he growled, targeting Boron's flagship. "Just one more shot." The Retribution shuddered as it fired, the recoil threatening to tear the ship apart. A blinding beam lanced out, slamming into the Malon vessel's shields. For a moment, it seemed like it might pierce through, but the alien defenses held. Logan sagged against the console, spent. He looked up at the main view screen, now showing only static and occasional flashes of the battle outside. In that moment of clarity, he saw Earth below, wreathed in fire and smoke. The virus bombers pushed ever closer, unstoppable. "I'm sorry," he whispered, a single tear cutting a path through the grime on his cheek. "We tried." Failed. The words died on Logan's lips as he watched the Malon armada surge forward, unopposed. The Retribution's last desperate salvo had barely scratched their shields. Viral bombers streaked past, their sleek forms silhouetted against Earth's blue expanse. Alarms screamed across the bridge. Sparks erupted from overloading consoles as the ship's systems reached critical failure. Logan stood alone, his crew long evacuated. "Damage report!" he barked out of habit, but only static answered. Through the cracked view screen, he watched escape pods jettison from the lower decks. Tiny specks against the inferno of battle. Each pod carried a piece of his heart, the brave men and women he'd led into this hopeless fight. A fuzzy signal cut through the static haze. Logan's eyes widened as he recognized the presidential seal. His fingers flew across the blood-smeared console, decrypting the message. The president's voice, weary and resigned, filled the bridge. "Captain Skora, you've done all you can. It's time for the Omega Protocol." Logan's breath caught in his throat. The Omega Protocol, the unthinkable last resort. He'd hoped they'd never have to use it. "Understood, sir," Logan replied, his voice steady despite the trembling in his hands. He entered his command codes, overriding the fail-safes on the quantum singularity core. Warning klaxons blared as deep in the bowels of the ship, massive containment doors began to open. The ship shuddered, metal groaning as if in pain. Logan turned his gaze to Earth one last time. Fiery streaks crisscrossed the atmosphere as the virus bombs fell. Entire continents vanished beneath roiling clouds of black smoke. He closed his eyes, offering a silent prayer for the billions below. A violent tremor rocked the ship. Proximity alarms shrieked as sensors detected an impossibility, a tear in the very fabric of space-time, erupting from the Retribution's core. On his flagship, Emperor Boron's triumphant laughter died in his throat. The alien tyrant stared in disbelief at the swirling vortex of utter darkness forming before him. "Impossible!" he hissed, mandibles clicking furiously. "All ships full reverse! Get us out of here!" But it was too late. The artificial singularity's hunger was insatiable. Logan watched as kilometer-long dreadnoughts crumpled like paper, twisted and torn apart by unimaginable gravitational forces. Fighters and debris swirled into the maw, devoured in an instant. Boron's flagship, a massive construct of alien alloys, began to buckle. On the bridge, the Emperor raged, pounding his control panels as his ship was inexorably drawn towards oblivion. "You savage primitives!" Boron's final transmission crackled across all frequencies. "You would destroy everything rather than submit? Then let the void take us all." The warship's hull tore apart, sucked into the singularity along with its screaming master. On Earth, the few survivors emerging from deep bunkers gazed up in awe and terror. The sky itself seemed to darken as a cosmic maelstrom raged overhead. Streaks of light, the death throes of planets and stars, spiraled into the growing abyss. In the war room, deep beneath the shattered remains of Washington, D.C., grim-faced scientists pored over the data. The conclusion was inescapable. The singularity's growth was exponential, unstoppable. Earth, the sun, the entire solar system, all would be consumed within hours. As the sky grew ever darker, humanity faced its final moments not with a whimper, but with the roar of a cosmic maelstrom devouring everything in its path. Skora's hands flew across the Retribution's battered control console. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he punched in the emergency evacuation codes. Klaxons blared throughout the dying ship. "All hands abandon ship," he bellowed into the comms. "This is not a drill. Get to the escape pods now." Crew members scrambled through smoke-filled corridors, helping injured comrades to the escape pods. Skora grabbed essential data cores and supplies, shoving them into a reinforced case. As the ship groaned and buckled around them, Skora and his XO sprinted for the last dropship. They barely cleared the airlock before the Retribution's hull tore apart behind them. "Punch it!" Skora yelled to the pilot. The dropship's engines roared to life, propelling them away from the swirling vortex of destruction. Through the viewports, Skora watched in horror as massive Malin warships crumpled like tin cans, pulled inexorably into the singularity's maw. "Sir," the pilot's voice cracked, "Earth, it's—" Skora's chest tightened as he saw his homeworld engulfed in a blinding flash. In an instant, billions of lives, thousands of years of human history, gone. "Keep us on course," he ordered, his voice raw. "We can't look back now." The dropship streaked through space, joined by a handful of other battered craft carrying the remnants of humanity. Skora's eyes scanned the cabin, taking in the shell-shocked faces of his crew and the handful of civilians they'd managed to save. In the flickering emergency lights, Skora pulled up star maps on a cracked datapad. His fingers trembled as he searched for any potential sanctuary among the stars. "Captain," his XO whispered, pointing at a rapidly depleting gauge. "Life support won't last more than a few days at this rate." Skora nodded grimly, about to respond when a crackling transmission cut through the somber silence. "This is Sarah Reeves," a familiar voice rang out. "Is anyone else out there?" Skora snatched up the comm unit. "Sarah, this is Captain Skora. We hear you." "Captain!" Relief flooded her voice. "We made it out, but Earth is gone. Everything's gone." "I know," Skora replied, his throat tight. "But we're still here. As long as we survive, there's hope." There was a pause, then Sarah's voice came back, stronger. "You're right. We can't give up now. Where do we go from here, Captain?" Skora's eyes fell on an old classified file buried deep in the ship's databanks. A faint spark of hope ignited in his chest. "I have coordinates," he announced to the convoy. "It's a long shot, but it might be our only chance. An unexplored system far from here. If we can reach it—" He let the words hang in the air, not daring to voice the slim possibility of a new beginning. Instead, he punched in the coordinates, watching as the navigation system calculated the perilous journey ahead. The small fleet of escape craft adjusted course, accelerating into the vast unknown. Behind them, the light of their dying solar system faded, swallowed by the cosmic void they'd unleashed. Skora gazed out at the star-flecked darkness before them. Somewhere out there lay the seeds of humanity's future, if they could reach it. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenges ahead. All ships, he broadcast to the convoy. Prepare for long-range FTL jump. We've got a long road ahead. The void of intergalactic space stretched endlessly before them, a dark expanse punctuated by the faint glow of distant galaxies. Captain Logan Skora stood at the viewport of the lead dropship, his eyes fixed on the instrument panel displaying their trajectory towards the Tyrillian dwarf galaxy. "Status report," he barked, turning to face his haggard crew. Lieutenant Chen, her face gaunt from weeks of rationing, looked up from her console. "Fuel reserves at 12%, sir. Life support systems holding, but barely." Skora nodded, his teeth clenched. He'd known the journey would be brutal, but the reality of their situation hit him anew each day. Behind them, the remnants of humanity limped along in a ragtag convoy of battered dropships and civilian craft. A sudden alarm blared through the cabin. Skora lunged for the comms panel. "Dropship Echo, report." Static crackled, then a panicked voice cut through. "Captain, we're losing power. Systems are—" The transmission cut off abruptly. On the external cameras, Skora watched helplessly as Echo's engines sputtered and died. The ship drifted off course, tumbling into the endless black. "Good God," whispered Chen. Skora closed his eyes for a moment, then steeled himself. "Mark their last known coordinates. We'll come back for them if we can." Days blurred together as the convoy pushed on. Skora paced the cramped confines of his ship, checking and rechecking their dwindling supplies. The faces of his crew grew more hollow, hope fading from their eyes with each passing hour. A violent shudder rocked the ship, claxons blaring to life. "Particle storm dead ahead," shouted the navigator. "We need to adjust course now." Skora's hands flew across the controls, plotting a new trajectory. "All ships, follow my lead. We're going to slingshot around." His words died in his throat as he saw a smaller craft break formation, caught in the storm's pull. "It's the president's daughter," Chen cried. "Her pod's going off course." Without hesitation, Skora grabbed the controls. "I'm going after her. Chen, you have command of the convoy. Keep them on course no matter what." Ignoring her protests, Skora disengaged from the group, pushing his engines to the limit. Warning lights flashed across his console as he dove into the particle storm. Static filled his comms, but he caught a glimpse of the wayward pod tumbling ahead. Gritting his teeth against the G-forces, Skora maneuvered alongside the failing craft. Through the viewport, he saw the pale face of a young woman, her eyes wide with terror. "Hang on," he shouted, though he knew she couldn't hear. With a series of precise bursts from his maneuvering thrusters, Skora matched the pod's erratic spin. Warning klaxons screamed as his ship's hull temperature spiked. Ignoring the danger, he extended the docking clamps, latching onto the pod with a bone-jarring impact. As Skora's engines roared to life, dragging them both clear of the storm, he saw the pod's life support readouts flatline. Not a moment too soon. Hours later, reunited with the convoy, Skora stood on the bridge of the lead ship. Ahead, a faint ping on the long-range sensors grew stronger. "Sir," called out the sensor operator, excitement creeping into his voice for the first time in weeks. "I'm picking up automated telemetry. It matches the coordinates from your recon files." A collective breath seemed to be held as the distant star system came into view. Skora leaned forward, his heart pounding. "This is it, people," he said softly. "Our last chance." The ships plunged into the planet's atmosphere, hull plates glowing red-hot as they screamed through dense cloud banks. Skora's fist clenched on the control yoke as he fought to keep the craft stable. With a final bone-rattling shudder, they broke through the cloud cover. Skora's eyes widened as he took in the alien landscape below. Jagged spires of crystalline minerals jutted from the ground, their surfaces glinting in the wan light of a distant sun. Steaming pools of hyperacidic liquid dotted the terrain, surrounded by choking clouds of ammonia. "My God," breathed Chen, "how can we possibly survive here?" Skora's response was cut off as the sensor officer called out again. Captain, I'm detecting pockets of breathable atmospheres and vegetation. It's faint, but it's there. Hope surged through Skora's chest as he guided the ships towards one of these oases. As they touched down on relatively stable ground, he turned to his crew. Prep for surface recon. Full envirosuits, weapons hot. We don't know what's out there. Stepping out onto the alien soil, Skora led a small team away from the landing site. Each step was careful, probing for stability on the unfamiliar terrain. Handheld scanners beeped steadily, monitoring the toxic atmosphere beyond their suit seals. There, Skora pointed. In the distance, a shimmering dome of energy was barely visible, encasing a patch of green in the otherwise barren landscape. As they approached the dome, a faint signal pinged on their comms. Skora frowned, adjusting the frequency. His eyes widened as he deciphered the transmission. It's a terraforming beacon, he breathed, and it's been here for centuries. The implications hit him like a physical blow. Somehow, long ago, the seeds of human survival had been planted on this hostile world. Now it fell to Skora and his ragtag band of survivors to see if they could take root. Back at the makeshift camp, Skora found Chen waiting for him, her face grim behind her faceplate. Sir, she said, her voice tight, it's the president's daughter. The radiation exposure from the particle storm. She's not doing well. Skora's chest tightened. He looked out over the huddled groups of survivors, their faces a mixture of fear and desperate hope. In the distance, the terraforming beacon pulsed steadily, a faint heartbeat in the alien wasteland. He took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. Gather everyone, he ordered Chen. We've got work to do. Skora led his team through the narrow access tunnels, the beams of their flashlights cutting through the murky darkness. The air grew thicker as they descended, carrying the musty scent of long-abandoned spaces. Watch your step, Skora called out, his voice echoing off the metallic walls. We don't know what we're dealing with down here. As they emerged into a vast cavern, Skora's breath caught in his throat. Towering hydroponic arrays stretched into the gloom, their surfaces glinting with an otherworldly light. Lush vegetation spilled from countless tiers, fed by automated nutrient systems that hummed with ancient power. My God, Chen whispered, her eyes wide behind her faceplate. It's beautiful. Skora nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. Fan out, he ordered. I want every inch of this place scanned and cataloged. As the team dispersed, Skora's comm unit crackled to life. Captain, a tense voice cut through. We've got a problem with the outpost's core systems. Skora's stomach dropped as he listened to the report. The quantum reactor's antimatter containment was failing, threatening to tear the entire underground sanctuary apart in a matter of solar cycles. Understood, Skora replied, his eyebrows furrowed. Get every scientist we have working on stabilizing that reactor. We need more time. He turned to Chen, his expression grim. Assemble recon teams. We need to find a way out of here. Functional ships, hyperdrive components, anything that could get us off-world. As Skora led his armed teams deeper into the alien catacombs, the air grew thick with an acrid stench. Suddenly, a blood-curdling shriek echoed through the tunnels. Contact! Someone yelled as massive insectoid creatures poured from hidden crevices. Their chitinous bodies gleamed in the flashlight beams, mandibles snapping with murderous intent. Gunfire erupted, the confined space amplifying the deafening roar. Skora watched in horror as one of his men was snatched up, the creature's mandibles tearing through his enviro-suit like paper. Fall back! Skora shouted, firing his weapon as he retreated. We need reinforcements! In the chaos, a panicked voice cut through the comms. Captain, the president's daughter, she's gone. Skora's blood ran cold as he saw one of the monstrosities dragging the young woman's limp form into a darkened tunnel. Chen! He barked. Hold the line here! I'm going after her! Skora assembled a small strike force, their faces set with unyielding commitment as they plunged into the labyrinth of tunnels. The sounds of battle faded behind them, replaced by the unsettling skittering of unseen horrors in the darkness. After what felt like hours of navigating twisting passages, they emerged into a massive chamber. Skora's stomach lurched at the sight before him. The president's daughter lay motionless, half submerged in a pulsating egg sac. Surrounding her, a writhing mass of insectoid nightmares shrieked and clawed at the air. "There!" Skora pointed, his voice hoarse. "We have to get her out of there!" The team opened fire, but their ammunition was quickly depleted against the endless horde. As the creatures closed in, Skora made a desperate decision. "Everyone back!" he shouted, priming the last of their explosives. "We're bringing this whole place down!" The detonation rocked the chamber, sending tons of rock crashing down. Skora grabbed the president's daughter, slicing through the slimy tendrils that held her. "This way!" one of his men called out, gesturing towards a reinforced doorway barely visible through the dust and debris. They stumbled into what appeared to be an emergency shelter, its systems humming to life at their presence. Skora's hands flew over the ancient controls, activating a hibernation protocol as the outpost's reactor began to overload. "Everyone in the pods," he ordered, helping the unconscious woman into one of the stasis chambers. "It's our only chance." As Skora sealed himself into the last pod, he caught a glimpse of roiling energy consuming the cavern beyond the shelter's viewport. Then, darkness claimed him. Centuries passed in the blink of an eye. Skora's eyes snapped open as the hibernation pod hissed open, alarms blaring throughout the small chamber. He stumbled out, his legs weak from disuse, just as a final, catastrophic purge from the outpost's shattered reactor spewed radioactive promethium across the crypt's shielding. Skora's heart raced as he took in the sight of his skeletal crew stirring from their pods. They had survived, but at what cost? And what world awaited them beyond the shelter's battered walls? The stasis pods hissed open, unleashing a cloud of cryogenic vapor. Skora's eyes snapped open, his body racked with violent shivers as centuries of hibernation wore off. He stumbled out, legs weak and unsteady, his pupils dilating from the abrupt awakening. Alarms blared throughout the small chamber, red warning lights casting an eerie glow. Skora's crew stirred from their pods, faces gaunt and confused. The captain's gaze fell upon the president's daughter, now an aged woman struggling to breathe. A deafening roar shook the shelter. Through the viewport, Skora witnessed a nightmare unfold. The outpost's reactor core vomited forth a torrent of deadly radiation, bathing the sealed crypt in a sickly green glow. "Move!" Skora shouted, his voice hoarse from disuse. He lunged for the president's daughter, grabbing her frail form and dragging her towards the airlock. The klaxons grew louder, drowning out the panicked cries of his crew. With trembling hands, Skora slammed the airlock controls. The inner chamber sealed shut, trapping the lethal radiation. He turned to the president's daughter, her skin already mottled and blistering from exposure. A medic rushed forward, scanner in hand. The device beeped frantically, confirming what they already knew. Skora met the woman's eyes, seeing a lifetime of pain and regret in their clouded depths. "Captain," she rasped, her voice barely above a whisper, "you must preserve us, our DNA, find a new home, promise me." Skora clasped her hand, feeling the life ebb from her body. "I swear it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We'll carry humanity's legacy to the stars." With a final rattling breath, the president's daughter slipped away. Skora allowed himself a moment of grief before stealing his purpose. He turned to his crew, their faces a mix of fear and tenacity. "Medics, secure any uncontaminated genetic samples," he ordered. "The rest of you prep for evac. We're getting off this rock." They ventured out of the shelter, and Skora's heart sank. The once lush hydroponics bays were now charred husks, plasma clouds drifting like vengeful spirits, rivers of molten metal carved through the chamber floors, the heat searing even through their protective suits. A technician's voice crackled over the comm. "Captain, we've got a ping on long-range scanners. There's a ship in the auxiliary docking bay." Hope surged through Skora's chest. "All teams converge on that location. Move!" They raced through the disintegrating outpost, the very air around them seeming to burn. Skora watched in horror as chunks of superheated debris rained down, missing his team by mere inches. The ship loomed before them, an ancient relic from humanity's early explorations. Its hull gleamed with an otherworldly sheen, untouched by the devastation around it. "Get those genetic samples aboard," Skora bellowed as they reached the boarding ramp. "We've got one shot at this." A violent tremor rocked the outpost. Skora turned in time to see a massive shockwave tear through the vaulted ceilings. Shrapnel filled the air, a deadly hail of superheated metal. Screams of agony pierced the air as the stragglers were caught in the barrage. Limbs were sheared off, bodies pulverized by the impact. Skora dragged the survivors aboard, their flesh seared and blackened. With a skeleton crew of the gravely wounded, Skora threw himself into the pilot's seat. His hands flew over unfamiliar controls, praying the ancient ship would respond. The outpost began to implode around them, reality itself seeming to warp and buckle. Skora punched the launch sequence, feeling the ship lurch beneath him. They burst free of the collapsing structure, riding the edge of a cosmic shockwave. The ship bucked and heaved, alarms blaring as its systems struggled to compensate. Skora gripped the controls, his squeezing hard with strain. Through the view screen, he watched reality blur and twist. His crew screamed in agony as waves of energy washed over them, their very atoms seeming to dance on the edge of dissolution. When the maelstrom finally subsided, Skora found himself staring at an alien world through the cracked view screen. Bizarre flora dotted the landscape, creatures beyond imagination roaming its surface. The ship plummeted towards the virgin soil, its systems failing. Skora fought for control, but it was a losing battle. They struck the ground with bone-shattering force, the impact tearing the craft apart. In the aftermath of the crash, Skora dragged himself from the wreckage. His body was a mass of pain, flesh seared away to reveal gleaming bone steel beneath. A singular crimson cyber lens flickered in what remained of his face. With trembling hands, he clutched a case containing humanity's last hope, vials of genetic material, and an ancient logbook. Skora surveyed the alien landscape, his cybernetic eye calculating survival probabilities. The weight of his vow pressed down upon him. In this cosmic wilderness, he would plant the seeds of humanity's rebirth. The universe would not forget them. It would not mock their passing. Skora took a halting step forward, each movement an act of defiance against the cosmos that had sought to snuff them out. The mission.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.